because he frames it in such a beautiful way that it allows parents to step back and go, oh, okay, I just need to do my best. That parents are shepherds and not engineers, meaning that every child is born with over 400 personality traits that will emerge as they get older and has nothing to do with your parenting. So your job, do you think that you can engineer an outcome if I just do all the right things perfectly and get sleep training perfect and then diet perfect and then gut health perfect, because now gut health is a big thing, and then discipline perfect and everything, then I'm going to get some outcome that I have in my head, and that is false. And it doesn't matter how you do those things, and it all comes out in the wash, and your child's going to be who they were programmed to be with the software they had. And all you should do, instead of being engineers, be a shepherd. Shepherds pick the field that the sheep graze in. They provide the nurturing and the loving environment to allow their charges to just develop in the best environment to be the best version of who they are supposed to be all along. They don't turn sheep into dogs.
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to have Dr. Michael Milobsky joining me today. He's a pediatrician based in Colorado. He's been a pediatrician for 25 years. He's the host of the podcast, Your Kids Will Be Fine. He's the father of 7 and the grandfather of 4 and counting. And you can find him on Instagram, Peds at the Meadows, all one word, and a bunch of other platforms I'll share in the description below. Dr. Milobsky, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to be having this conversation.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So we just had, my wife and I just had our first baby. He's almost 4 months. And so I'm highly caffeinated, highly caffeinated to get through this. And I promise this wasn't just a ruse to get some free medical advice to get you on here and then pump you for some medical advice here. But
you also have my cell phone now, so it all works out.
It's just an amazing plan I've got going here. We've also got some financial advisors coming on next. We've got the whole thing set up. People. You never know. Good. So my wife loves your content. She started following you when our baby arrived. And the video that really got my attention was you put out a video many, many months, if not years, after October 7th, speaking to the anti-Semitism that
actually
you as a Jewish doctor.
It was about 3 weeks ago, and I was getting very, very sick of ignoring the comments because that's what I've been doing. It's about a third of the comments, more on TikTok than Instagram, but definitely regularly, blatantly, if not covertly anti-Semitic. And I simply wanted to address them and move on. So I posted a kind of sharp video about it. Yes.
Well, to not move on, to discuss it further, let's show the video for those who haven't seen it. And then I'd love to chat to you about it.
This is going to be uncomfortable, but I need to address this. Been seeing a lot of this on my feed. Jew. And I've not made any attempts to hide that I'm openly Jewish, that I raise my family. We have an Orthodox Jewish home. And this is showing up on my feeds more and more. When my videos get more attention, inevitably this comes up. So I want to talk about what this means to me when I see it. It's not going to be any mystery to anybody who interacts with the medical system that Jews are overrepresented in the medical system. There are a lot of Jewish doctors out there. I know that's not going to be a shock to anybody. Why do you think that is? It's for the simple reason that the singular highest Jewish value above every other Jewish value is saving lives, preserving life. In fact, it's so important that every other law, custom, and value is suspended in order to be able to potentially save another human life. And it doesn't matter whether that human life is wrapped in any particular package, color, religion, it doesn't change. There is a sacred understanding of the divinity of human life, and that all people and all humans rise to that level, and therefore we're mandated to put aside everything to help another person that way. So when I see this, that's the value that I think of and the value that I live by and the value that I practice by when I'm either taking care of patients in my office, in the pediatric ER, in the hospital, in the nursery, wherever I go. And I do know that in the comment section, we're going to get references to the Israel-Palestine war, and it's a tragedy. I don't think any pediatrician of any stripe can feel anything but sadness at the loss of life. I feel sadness when I think about Jewish babies that were ripped away from their parents and beheaded and burned and slaughtered in front of them. And I feel sadness thinking about the people of Gaza who were dragged into that situation and then sacrificed by their leadership needlessly. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So when I see this word, when this word comes up, I think of the value that I live by and that I try to model for my children and for my family.
So when you made this video, it's obviously been months, years since October 7th, where anyone who is in any way obviously Jewish in public life or even in private life has faced this just level of anti-Semitism that I certainly, since being in America since 2013, have never seen the mainstreaming of it. What pushed you to that point? Because you could have made that video at any point since October 7th, 2023, and it would have made perfect sense.
I could have. You know, it's really interesting, your last statement. You know, I grew up in America. I was born in 1970. I was raised in suburban Washington, D.C. In the 70s and 80s. And then I went on to Philadelphia and then on to Baltimore. That's college, med school residency, and then Colorado the last 25 years. Anti-Semitism in my childhood and young adult life was a myth, literally a myth. It was a story told by my grandparents that was very nice, but had literal zero application in my lived experience through my entire adult life, literally. And it was, and maybe you heard echoes of it through, and just, I'm completely non-political. I didn't even vote in the last election, to be perfectly honest. You would hear echoes of maybe this happened during the Trump campaign or this or that, but it was never in front of me until October 7th. As a religious Jew, someone who wears this in public and live in an Orthodox Jewish community and walking to and from synagogue on the Sabbath, all of a sudden it was part of my life at age 55. And increasingly, mostly an online thing as my social media has grown. I've been doing social media as part of my business and my practice since 2020 or 2019, but has gotten out much bigger in the last year for whatever reason. And with that increasing exposure came the online social media anti-Semitism flooding my feed. At least it feels that way because maybe it's only a third of all my comments, but of course our brains always only look at the negative. We hyper focus on that. And it was really disturbing. It really disturbed me to my core. In my lived experience outside of that, the community where I practice in is not at all. They embrace me and they love that I'm an outwardly religious person. The community where I live is a suburban Orthodox Jewish community mixed into a non-Jewish community, and very little outside of a drive-by, a epithet or slur yelled out of a car window, not much else. But now we have an armed guard at our synagogue most days, and two on the Shabbat and holidays. And so when the comments started, it was probably the better part of the last 6 months. I would either erase them or ignore them, or let my audience fight it out in the comments. But it became increasingly intrusive, and I at least felt the need to directly address it instead of sweeping it under the rug and pretending that I don't see it. And with that, it was obviously loaded because of the Israel-Gaza-Palestinian war started by Hamas, and I have very strong feelings about that. I have a daughter that has just made Aliyah and lives in Israel. I have family that lives there. I know the history. I feel very, very connected to not just the recent events. So the throwaway apartheid genocide thing I hate because it's just ignorance, and so I had to address it. You can't address one these days. You can't address one as a pediatrician because I'm talking about health. That's what I get confronted with. So I had to just say it all.
What do you think about, I think one of the really interesting parts of the video was your presentation of the protection of life as a Jewish value, which, of course, anyone who knows anything about Judaism, we're both Jews, we know that is central to your existence as a Jew. Yeah. So life becomes more important than anything else. Right. What I found so fascinating, if you look at this, if you set the emotion aside, which is very, very difficult to do, if you look at this almost in an academic sense, it's the inversion of the accusations. When you have everything that we are accused of as Jews, not even as Israelis, just as Jews. Applies to the same people who are trying to destroy people in the Middle East and across the world simply because they are Jews.
Yes.
How have you dealt with that? I'm sure you've gotten pushback on this. I don't know if you've engaged with that 100%. Pushback.
The problem is that it is, as you know, it is such a nuanced discussion that takes so long to unwind. It's not amenable to a comment section or a 3-minute video. I know in my heart that Israel's actions are geared towards protecting life at all costs whenever possible, both the lives of Israeli citizens, and that's why October 7th couldn't be ignored. But the IDF, which has its faults, no one is, anyone who has been directly connected can't say that the IDF never makes mistakes or never does something incorrect. But people who intimately know that the IDF in the probably most complex, densely populated combat or battle space that's ever been created between Gaza and the tunnels, to continually make great efforts, even at the risk of their own troops, to minimize and give the opportunity for civilians to leave and to relocate and to signal their intentions, to do their best. And even in any war scenario, it's still not going to be enough. And as a pediatrician, I grieve and I experience pain for the plight of children in Gaza, but it is also my strong conviction that all of that is lays firmly at the feet of Hamas and no one else. It is Hamas that has inspired and brainwashed 2 generations of children in that region, that the highest form of good is to ensure the death of Jews generally and Israelis specifically. And there is no higher calling for an adult than to martyr themselves or their children to that cause. So even the best IDF efforts often result in no response, because they're dealing with a group of people that welcome it and want it. And like Golda Meir said, Golda Meir's words still echo through October 7th, which is that until they love their children more than they love death, or I don't know the quote exactly, but that's the point. Until the Arabs and the Palestinians love their children as much as they love death or more than they want to kill us, there's not going to be an end to this.
Well, the most frustrating thing for me is whenever I go on colleges and high schools quite often to talk about this issue, and there's a divide that I found, is there's the ignorant and there's the frankly evil. Most people are ignorant who've been taken in by the evil. And when you try and actually present the facts that you just presented, the reality of what Israel is trying to do or the Israeli military is trying to do, the reality of the enemy they face, I think there's just a naivety that almost speaks to the reality of peace that we all enjoy. I mean, I grew up in the UK where anti-Semitism was a thing. Like, we lived with an awful lot of anti-Semitism, specifically Muslim anti-Semitism that came along with immigration, which is a topic we should all talk about.
And we now know that it's also important. BBC anti-Semitism now.
Oh, apparently, BBC endorsed. Yeah, I think the funniest thing about the BBC story, exactly. A quick side note on that, my favorite thing about the BBC is when they translated the Arabic for Jew into Israeli to try and make it seem like it was just about Israel. Oh, yes. When of course it's not about Israel. It's all about the people who live in Israel. Yes. It's all about the Star of David on that flag. But the fact that you grew up in America without really facing severe anti-Semitism, I think, applies to people of all different backgrounds. The fact that America is generally so peaceful, so tolerant, so open, that I feel we're almost vulnerable to this level of ignorance-based hate, where you can be fed these things and you can't quite believe that there are people like Hamas out there. You cannot believe that there are people who are willing to do the kind of things they're willing to do. Yeah. That's really hard to get through to people with.
I agree. I think that, and I'm gonna. I think one of the and I know that you probably agree here, Ben Shapiro probably is one of the clearest voices about this and how that works with regards to applying American, specifically in Western values, onto a region that is you can't apply them to. And I'm going to preface this: I don't agree with everything Ben Shapiro says. I don't. On this topic, he happens to be the most articulate and the clearest voice for the Jewish community and the Jewish point of view. But that American academics and college students and young people in America simply just look at it with this metric of oppressed and oppressor, and it seems to be a very convenient template to lay over top of this because it looks like it falls right in the lines. You have Israelis that look white, a lot of them, although it's completely disregarding Mizrahi and Middle Eastern and Sephardi Jews that were kicked out, forcibly removed from most of the communities that had been present for thousands of years, and forced, and Israel saved them, as well as the remnants of European Jewry that was slaughtered in the Holocaust. But it seems like a very simple rubric to apply, and the truth is it has no application to this at all. Americans can't fathom that a group of people wouldn't simply want the same things they want. Don't they just want financial security and the opportunity to work and jobs and happiness for their children? It seems to make perfect sense because it fits our model exactly. And the Hamas propagandists have perfectly manipulated that view and perfectly manipulated that desire for Americans to apply that to this group of people. But unless you've lived there and understand the dynamics of that region and understand who Hamas is and who the Palestinian Authority is, and the fact that Palestinians were just Jordanians until they were manufactured by Yasser Arafat with Russian propaganda help, but that's all complex history. That's too much. It's so much easier just to say it's white people oppressing brown people, white people who might have all come from Europe, without recognizing the reality of it. And 2,000 years of Jewish presence or more in Jerusalem and in Israel. So hard. So much easier just to say this. And they can't fathom that those people actually don't want any of those things. They want and embrace death for themselves in order to accomplish death for this entire group of people and wiping them off the map. That's not a concept that is easily understood or absorbed by college students and American liberals, and even American liberal Jews who have no connection to Israel just because they've never been there, because their parents never sent them or they never did birthright. So it's so much easier. And that reality it's hard to wrap our heads around. So they just don't.
Yeah. And also the understanding of the double standard that's inherent in anti-Semitism, which I think a lot of people, again, through ignorance, don't quite understand, of the holding Jews, not even Israeli Jews, just Jews generally, holding them accountable for the imaginary crimes of the IDF, or expecting Jews to defend Israel. I mean, the fact that Jews in America are routinely accused of being behind what's going on in Israel. Let's assume the false premise that everything they say about Israel is true. Why is an American Jew who's never been to Israel, some of them have never even left the state, why are they responsible? It's the deep anti-Semitism at the heart of all of it.
Correct. And that strong idea that anti-Zionism really just is rebranded anti-Semitism because it feels more comfortable, and feels more geopolitical instead of personally.
On the subject of being a Jewish doctor, what are your thoughts on, I think this happened more in the UK, but it did happen in the US as well, is there's been a lot of stories online, again, not representative of the entire medical community, but there have been more than a few cases of doctors who've been virulently anti-Israel.
Yes.
And that's spread not into their rhetoric online, but their attitude towards treating Jewish patients. I mean, I know a lot of Jews in England who are afraid to go to certain doctors now because of this attitude. What's your opinion on that stuff, and how can we actually approach that and deal with that?
That is extremely hard, because now you're examining every doctor's time and statements and views outside of medicine, and then extrapolating and making assumptions about how they would deal with patients. It gets very tricky. I think that you got to take it seriously. There's been enough stories in the healthcare space of professionals. I think there was that really well publicized one in Australia where that Israeli creator caught those two nurses on a hospital ward and caught them in a very unguarded moment and saying exactly what they felt, which they would actually harm and kill Jewish patients if they had the opportunity. And I think that got people thinking a lot more. Yeah. Well, if that is out there, where does it stop? All the way to physicians. And I get it. And once again, I think it's part of the destructive brainwashing of the propagandist machine of Islamic, the Islamic terror in general, and Hamas specifically. I think it's shameful. I think that Israel, once again, sets an example and is a light. Israel treats injured Palestinians and sick Palestinians in their own facilities for free and returns them back, including the architect of October 7th, saved his life from a brain tumor. Israel routinely does this. I volunteer in Israeli hospitals. I go to the north and I volunteer at Galilee Medical Center. And I see it for myself. I see Arab doctors working alongside Israeli doctors as heads of departments. They treat all comers. They don't ask who they are, where they're from. They simply take care of people. And that's all over Israel. And so Israel sets the example. Israel's the first to show up in Haiti, Jamaica. These people aren't Jews. These people don't have any connection to Israel. They don't ask they don't ask what their political affiliations are or whether they've supported Israel in the past. They just show up to help because life is considered sacred.
The funniest thing, in a very dark way, is when people accuse Israel of being a colonial state, an apartheid state, and then you say, well, Arabs are overrepresented, for example, in medicine in Israel, according to the last statistics I saw. And it blows people's minds. They do not have this understanding that Israel, in many ways, should be everything that the radical so-called progressives in the United States want it to be.
Correct.
Trying being gay anywhere else in the Middle East.
Exactly.
Try being in any way open about progressive views that are anti-religious. Correct. Israel should be everything they want it to be. It's just because it's Jewish.
Israel is a progressive, liberal, inclusive democracy, and it's the only one in a sea of the opposite, surrounded by 53 Muslim countries. And we are fighting the same enemy, and Israel's often fighting our battle for us on that front. And that gets lost because, once again, it's so much easier to virtue signal your own liberal, progressive values by claiming that you're against apartheid and genocide. So therefore you have to be against Israel and therefore Jews. But that is just, it's a simple, uninformed, ignorant view that there's so much more underneath it, but you just choose not to engage in that.
I want to, in a little bit, I want to pivot to some non-anti-Semitism questions just to try and lift the mood a little bit, because it is, it's important but horrible to speak to. But I think what I really loved about that video you put out is, I'm a political commentator, so I speak about these issues. I focus on anti-Semitism, but I'm talking about politics and culture all day long. And I've seen a lot of Jews who aren't political, and it's fine not to be political. It's fine. If anything, it's better for your mental health not to care about politics. Frankly.
It is very much. It's how I preserve my own.
You're one of those people out there who I've seen choose to speak out on this issue. What would be your advice to a lot of other Jews out there who feel, for many reasons, either afraid or hesitant to speak out? Not necessarily in favor of Israel, because if you're not Israeli, I don't think you're obliged to, but just to speak out in protection of our faith and our right to be treated as equals in America.
So I think that American Jews should not be afraid to be openly Jewish. And I have been, openly Jewish for most of the last 20 years. And the truth of the matter is that the vast majority of the anti-Semitism that seems the loudest and seems the most threatening is mostly done by keyboard warriors who sit behind a screen and will never, ever have the courage or the conviction to actually step out from behind that keyboard or that screen. And it was my son who pointed this out. My youngest son is 25 and lives in Miami. And I was expressing my fears and my anxieties, especially with all the anti-Semitism. And he said, Abba, these people, they're weak-minded, so it all comes out online. And of course, it sounds so loud, but that's where it stays, 90% of it. And I think that that's true. You hear it, a lot of rhetoric, but in the public sphere, when you're out and walking, yes, I know it happens. We're seeing reports more and more, especially in New York and tightly, densely populated places. But I think Jews should be more proactive about being openly Jewish, because then people can see who we really are. You know, there's this idea of Kiddush Hashem, that your behavior in public is a credit to God and God's people. When you live the way you're supposed to live, the way Jewish people live in public, and people know that you're Jewish. You know, when I go out of my way to help everybody, when I put out videos with tons of free content to help whoever wants to watch them with whatever their processes are. You've seen my content. It's about parenting. It's about managing illness. It's about big questions. And I don't filter it based on who I think is watching. It's meant for everybody. You know, I've stopped being afraid and now embrace it even more, my public Jewish persona as much as my private Jewish life. And I encourage more American Jews to do that.
I think it's wonderful. And it's also what I try and tell people who are afraid to, is that they're coming after you either online or in person regardless. Because if you look at public life, the Jews who shirk in the shadows or hide or step back, then they just keep coming, keep pushing you back. So you might as well be proud and fight to stand where you want to stand.
100% agree.
So shifting over to your focus in life, which is as a pediatrician, as trying to help families and parents, trying to navigate this as a new parent has been interesting because I think, especially online, there is a lot of fear mongering out there. It's a naturally terrifying thing. Just you click your fingers and suddenly there's this tiny human life that depends on you for everything, and it's a trip, that's for sure. And so we both love your content. What drove you to start putting this kind of thing out there online in such a positive way? Because there's a huge amount of so-called, you know, medical influencers out there who love to put out this advice that's based on fear. And I found your content really doesn't take that route.
So it's been a journey. You know, when I first started social media, I didn't really know what I was doing. And, you know, I just put out what I thought, what I saw other pediatric creators doing, and just, hey, here's what you do for a cough, and here's what you do for this. But then I began to see that parenting in 2025, and you can speak to this, is a wholly different process and experience than it was. So we became parents in 1996. And we raised about 3 kids before even social media came on the scene, and then 4 more after that. I think, as from my own lived experience as a child in the 70s and 80s, and as a parent, again, spanning 2 very different eras, it is the hardest, I believe, the hardest and most difficult time, because the information overload is real. It's you can't just disconnect. You can't just tell someone, hey, just turn it off. That's not life. That's not reality anymore. All of us live our lives that way for a multitude of reasons. So that you have to throw that advice out. So you have to deal with the reality that the average new parent, and I'm going to restrict the discussion to new parents, because I think experienced parents come at it from a very different place because you have at least a reference. But new parents are now inundated, and there is with so much information that it takes an already very anxiety provoking time for everybody. You know, welcoming the responsibility of shepherding a new soul into the world and being a parent, which none of us feel adequately prepared for, no matter who you are. And combine that with the fact that most of us are living slightly more disconnected from the people that used to be much closer to us to ask, our parents, the grandparents. You know, people live further away, and so the community they develop tend to be their online communities, which tend to also feed into this, I think, toxic anxiety and parenting in the public sphere and feeling judged and not knowing what applies to me. And if this doesn't work for me because my lived experience is different, or we have a different style, then it's wrong. And then it just creates this spiral. So I started to then lean into my own. I feel like, well, I have way more to offer here than just advice about coughs and snotty noses and ear pain, because I've been a father for 29 years now, and a parent of 7, and also layered on top of that a career as a pediatrician in multiple spheres, pediatric ER, inpatient, and primary care. So then I started leaning into that, and that's why the title of the podcast is Your Kids Will Be Fine, because more people need to recognize that well-meaning and loving people who are becoming parents have most of what they already need to be successful parents. Perfection is not possible, so you have to let it go. And your parenting experience doesn't have to look like, it doesn't have to reflect what you're getting fed from all of this information overload, that you yourself have so many tools. It's just that they've been buried by this anxiety of information overload. It used to be, and this is my own, my own experience. We were 25, 26 years old when we started, and, we weren't burdened with all this, and we were able to, that feels right. We can do this. And we ask a few questions. You pick up a book like What to Expect the First Year, which, by the way, still my favorite book, and can often filter out a lot of the crap from the internet. So you should own that one. And found our way. And yes, we made tons of mistakes, but accepting that's just the reality of parenting, and you get better, and your next kids benefit from the mistakes you make on your first kid, but showing up and being able to be with humility. I tell people that my oldest son is 29. He's a father of 4. And every time they come home, which thank God is still a lot, that they still want to be with their siblings and their parents for holidays and get-togethers, I apologize to them at every opportunity. I'm really sorry that you had to be the first one. My 7th kid did not experience what my first kid went through with his parents. So that's the message I really tried to lean into. And I think it's been positive. It's clearly it resonates with people, and I try to empower and inspire people with that information, that it doesn't have to look any one way. And the best thing you can do for your child is to be the best version of yourself.
Absolutely. That's what we've tried to do. We say try because we routinely fail.
Exactly.
It's don't be anxious.
That's
solved.
normal. Exactly.
Just the worst phrase is don't worry about it, because the fact you were even raising it. No, we're past that.
Did he make it from yesterday to today? Yeah, then you're doing fine.
I think one of my friends who has 2 children now just said, keep them alive. That's it. And it's like, okay, I think I can do that.
You're in that phase of life right now. You're just trying to get through the day. You can't worry about the specifics as much.
What's your advice for people, though, who are trying to navigate this online world? Because I think, part of the generation, really, like my younger sister, who's 2 years younger than me, I think she grew up with social media and the internet far more than I did. I really feel like I'm 36. I'm right at that age where I grew up without all this nonsense. Like the idea of having a cell phone was something that maybe in my mid to late teens became normal, but it was, the brick cell phones you could play Snake on, and that's about it. I think things like Instagram.
You had to be a genius to figure out how to even do that on those.
It was like the focus of my early teens was that game, I'm afraid to say. But the idea of growing up with Instagram, I think, is just something that I really pity in a lot of ways younger generation for having to live under that shadow, because it is a projection of what everyone wants to be. And if you grow up not knowing that it's all a lie. Like, I feel like if you're a little older and you're on Instagram and you see all these influencers, you see them flaunting this lifestyle, for most people it's fake. To some extent it's fake. Either they're not truly happy, they're not truly fulfilled. Some of these things aren't even real. Like a lot of these private plane photos, they have companies in LA where you can hire a room that looks like a private plane just for the photo.
By the way, one of my business partners I consult with a couple of companies. His friend owns one of those, and you'd be astonished at the monthly income he makes from renting that out to influencers now. It is psychotic.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars a month he makes maintaining a fake private jet interior to photograph.
Just unbelievable. But I think that speaks to just the reality of what young people have to deal with. So for new parents out there who are trying to not only get through the day, deal with lack of sleep, but also deal with the onslaught from people they know and from people they don't know on what you should be doing, what you should be worrying about, and all these really, again, fear-mongering videos of this product's going to kill you, this behavior is going to kill you, when most things will not. But when you're in that mode of anxiety, you are so vulnerable to that.
You are, because really also scary. Your logical thinking part of your brain tends to disengage when your fear and your anxiety take over, and then it's hard to process. So if the question is, what advice would I give parents on how to navigate that part of their lives, especially new parents at the beginning of their parenting journey? I would say, one, it's unrealistic for me to tell people, ignore it, don't look at it. We're all going to look at it. I would say the people who you should put aside, I think you should just be more selective on what you consume when it comes to this space. Meaning, I would put aside and just not spend any time with parent influencers. They are speaking from their own anecdotal experience of one kid or two kids, and they're going to then look something up on ChatGPT or Google and then present that as the reality that everybody should deal with. I recommend sticking, at least at this phase, looking at board certified pediatric creators who are practicing pediatrics, who have something meaningful to say about whatever those topics are. You know, it's coming from a place of experience, not just with one or two kids, but treating and dealing with tens of thousands of kids, and is evidence-based. That's why, and that's why a lot of them have a large following, because they put out credible, usable information without the fear mongering. So at least I would say try to filter it that way instead of spiraling and scrolling through this parent influencer, that parent influencer. And I got to call out the chiropractors a little bit. They have no business talking about anything related to pediatrics. Doesn't matter what certificate they might say they have. You got to put them aside. This is, the difference in education is so vast that we're not even on the same planet. Pediatricians and chiropractors who might see kids, it's not even, it's laughable. So you got to put all those people aside and stick with where you're getting information from. I also recommend, and I wasn't kidding about the book, there are like a good book, let's say What to Expect the First Year, is produced and compiled and updated by pediatric professionals. And it's looked at for every couple of years and revised, and it's filtered, meaning it like, you'll be amazed. You'll look at that book. This is exactly the chapter on 2-month-olds. This is exactly what we were concerned about. And it has it right there. And you don't get all of the extraneous fear-mongering anxiety stuff that you get from the internet. So having something it's like a pre-filtered internet that you got to read, but we used to call them books, but now that's what it is. It's pre-filtered internet. So combining that and then I'd say the third step is having confidence and faith that your instincts and that your intentions when you become a parent are good. And that even though it's outdated, America all used to read this one book by Dr. Benjamin Spock. You ever heard of him?
I have not.
Benjamin Spock was America's pediatrician for 50 years. And the vast majority of people read his book. And my mother had his book in the 70s. The last edition that he wrote came out in 1996 before he died. And there was kind of a general consensus about, you as a parent have likely enough of information and intention and to be a good parent. And that's enough for most of the time. And but that consensus doesn't exist anymore. There are two people that I like to refer people to who I think provide the greatest mindset shift that I think gives parents this idea. One is Dr. Russell Barkley, who is a PhD neuropsychologist. He practiced at Stanford. You'll find most of his work around ADHD, but honestly, he gives a 5-minute video on YouTube, and you can find it, about the most important 5-minute video every parent should watch, because he frames it in such a beautiful way that it allows parents to step back and go, oh, okay, I just need to do my best. That parents are shepherds and not engineers, meaning that every child is born with over 400 personality traits that will emerge as they get older. It has nothing to do with your parenting. So your job, do you think that you can engineer an outcome if I just do all the right things perfectly and get sleep training perfect and then diet perfect and then gut health perfect? Because now, gut health is a big thing. And then discipline perfect and everything, then I'm going to get some outcome that I have in my head, and that is false. And it doesn't matter how you do those things. And it all comes out in the wash, and your child's going to be who they were programmed to be with the software they had. And all you should do, instead of being engineers, be a shepherd. Shepherds pick the field that the sheep graze in. They provide the nurturing and the loving environment to allow their charges to just develop in the best environment, to be the best version of who they're supposed to be all along. They don't turn sheep into dogs. They just make them the best version of the sheep they're supposed to be. So it's a beautiful, beautiful analogy. And when you hear him talk about it, parents can give themselves grace. I think they can think about, they don't have to be so anxious about getting everything right, that it doesn't matter as much as they think that it does.
What are your thoughts on the discipline side of things? Because I think, especially coming to America from England, on average, very different parenting styles. Yeah. I think the first time I went to a Whole Foods in California, I was just astounded. Like there were these mothers who were having conversations with newborns about which type of broccoli, and like they were getting in my way. I was in a rush.
I really want to make sure that you have input on this. Exactly.
So there's this. What are your views on where you go into coddling or where you should be more disciplined? I'm going to leave that as more of a general question, not to put you up against the wall too much.
So discipline actually comes from the word to teach and not to punish. Mm-hmm. And I think it fits very nicely into the shepherd, not engineer rubric. And then you're going to see a lot. If you delve into this, you're going to see a lot about parenting styles. I don't know if you guys have run into that yet, whether permissive versus authoritative versus authoritarian. Harvard just ran a big study about emotional outcomes in children. And what they found was that the basic approach of parents being loving and responsive and present, but how that was expressed, whether it was expressed in one way or another, didn't seem to matter. Ended up with the outcomes of healthier, more emotionally healthy, better developed kids. And when you think about that, every parent already knows that. Like that is instinctual. And maybe because you were raised one way, it'll come out looking a little different than your neighbors because they're raised a different way. But meaning that you already know so much of what you need to know for your kids to be. You're already the parent that your kid needs. And most of the mistakes are made when we don't recognize how our children trigger our own wounds that we haven't resolved yet, like our own unresolved anxiety, our unresolved childhood issues, that when our children behave a certain way, which is completely developmentally normal appropriate, we react so strongly because it hits upon something that we haven't really bothered to look at and deal with. And when we can do that, we react in a much healthier way. And whether you choose to do it one way, the other way, this way, whatever parenting hack or style resonates with you, the basic idea that being present and loving and consistent and responsive, and that recognizing that you're a shepherd, that all of your kids are going to be different, that it's unrealistic to expect exact replication of things from one kid to the next. The baby boomer parents that raised Generation X, every kid was like, this is the way we do it. And it doesn't, individual needs don't matter because this is how we do it in our house. That's outdated. Every kid needs something different from you. Every kid is a Rubik's Cube that has to be solved differently. And when you can do that and you can recognize where your own wounds and your own reactivity is triggered and then how to do better with that because you are working on that. That's why parenting is the most important and greatest and most powerful personal growth activity that any of us can engage in. I don't judge people for their choices. Kids aren't for everybody, but it's impossible for me to understand that how you actually become the best version of yourself if you aren't ever a parent or someone's spouse or both. So I don't know if that was too general, but that's my basic answer. That was great. I think for me, the real eye-opening moment was to truly not be selfish anymore. Because you may not be a selfish person, but when it's just you, or just your spouse, you're two adults, like you could click your fingers, go your own separate ways. It would be fine. I don't think you should. I think that's the destruction of marriage is one of the worst things happening. Maybe less extreme. You can sleep till 11 on a Sunday.
Yes.
Go out to brunch.
Or that.
Now, whatever.
Those wonderful days.
And we're going through mimosas. Then we're going to the farmer's market. Feel like it, don't feel like it. Rewind, do it again next weekend. It's all just that.
Yeah. But it's just, I think, turning your back and embracing that you are not the most important thing to you anymore is an amazing feeling. I think it gives everyone purpose, and it sucks sometimes, right? I think the idea, again, from the influences of parenting is this wonderful, like when you're being peed on at 2 a.m, or your baby just had explosive poop all over you and, you've got to get ready for work. It's not ideal. It's not magical.
It sucks. It sucks for a long time. And you're this, like everything in psychology has started. Parents, especially your parents, are way less happy than they used to be. But what is changed is that people who can make that shift find profound meaning in the process. And they see it from the bigger picture. And that ultimately results in a sense of purpose and growth and transcendence and connection that is not duplicatable. And that is a totally different world to live in. And it doesn't stop when your kids are 18 or 16. You are still all about them. And yes, I have more time for myself. I get up when I want to now after 7 kids and forever. I get up when I feel like it finally. But by the time you can do that, you're old. So that time is 4:48 a.m. doesn't matter anymore. All right. You can exercise when you feel like it. All that stuff is great, but you still see yourself as, you're there for them. But my life is immeasurably enriched and has transcendence and spirituality meaning because of them. And that is a really, really profound, and you can look past just your own, immediate situation. And it's, I'm not minimizing it. It sucks, especially first time through, because it's the first time in your adult life, as you pointed out, that you are now completely immersed in the need for another person 24/7. But then that just becomes second nature. That's just part of just part of the deal. But it is
another really wonderful side effect of it is also, I think, it has made me judge other people less.
So much less. You cannot.
It's like, you don't know what someone's going through. You don't know how stressed they are. You don't know how tired they are. You don't know what a terrible night they just had. And I think it certainly made me judge, when you don't have children, it's so easy to look at parents and judge them if the house was messy or if they're late to something.
How about especially on an airplane? Have you been on an airplane yet with kids and people without kids, and the amount of that to me is where that point that you just made to me is most present in airports and airplanes.
Yeah. And I think I tried to be, I'm not saying I always succeeded, but I tried to be kind and tried to be understanding. But I don't think you can truly understand until even going to a grocery store with a baby and they're just having a meltdown, and just everything it's like climbing a mountain with your eyes shut. Everything is suddenly so difficult. And it's just, until you truly understand that, you can never empathize. But again, it's a wonderful thing you share with other people. You have this kind of nod of understanding, and then you get on with your day.
When you pass each other in the aisles of Target, and you're like,
it's just, your eyes are hanging beneath by your knees. It's just,
you're wearing your Spain t-shirt because you haven't bothered to change it from breakfast, and it's a beautiful connection.
It really is. I know we're coming up against the time when you have to get back to your real job, not just talk to me. So the one thing I wanted to touch on is kind of a phenomenon in the last couple of years, especially, I think since COVID, there's been a general sense of growing distrust of institutions generally, and especially in the medical institutions or the field of so-called the science.
I'm going to just add to that, since RFK, pediatricians are at the top of that list because of what he has done with, people's understanding or what they think their understanding is of vaccines, and how pediatricians are somehow motivated or somehow compensated or somehow, profit from putting kids in harm's way that we know is harmful just to make extra money. That whole idea has risen to the top, at least in my world, because that's a big part of what I do.
Yeah, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I'm a conservative commentator, and I'm one of the few out there who are critical of RFK for a variety of reasons, which I won't get into here. But if anyone out there is interested, go check out what I've written about him. It is certainly not in line with the general MAGA movement. But I think he speaks to, it is almost the wrong answer to a reasonable question. And I think after COVID especially, a lot of people felt huge levels of distrust in what they were told, largely by the political scientific community, not the scientific community. Because if you actually listen to people in the medical field, they had a completely different viewpoint to those who are in the political side of things. But regardless, the damage was done. And I think now with social media, it's snowballing. You have a lot of the conspiracy theory side of things too. So what would be your answer to those people out there who I think have reasonable questions? I think it's reasonable to question all of these decisions.
Agreed.
I guess my question would be, to whom should you be going for answers if it's not RFK and a random 21-year-old on TikTok who's just reading Wikipedia that morning?
Do you want to limit that? I mean, to me, the biggest issue within that question revolves around vaccination. So would you like me to put
Sure. Yeah, let's focus on vaccinations in the context of that.
So I will 100% acknowledge that the whole the way information was presented and managed to the public was patronizing, patriarchal, gave people no credit for being intelligent, thinking people. And honestly, like not being able to admit that we know this, but we don't know that. And here's what we know, here's what we don't know. And it just left to such a bad taste when everything finally came out about our understanding, rightfully so, as you pointed out, people began to question a lot of other things. So I totally get it. I don't talk a lot about vaccines on my channel, as your wife will attest. I put out one video on the topic, but you should talk first to your pediatrician, and then you should look at credible resources. I think one of the finest, balanced, and deepest one is the one put up by the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is one of the finest children's facilities in the country, if not the world. Right up, Harvard, Hopkins, CHOP are always in the same conversation. And they have a vaccine resource center, which provides probably the deepest, most balanced understanding of all of the questions that people have. But in short, what your pediatrician knows and what they know is that we've been vaccinating children in this country for a century. And it has spared and saved innumerable tens of millions of lives and improved the lives of children in this country and around the world. And our memories are short, so we forget what life is like when we lived under the threat of your child could end up in an iron lung or die rapidly of a rapidly progressive meningitis that is hard to diagnose and treat, like H influenza or pneumococcal infections. And so, and children dying routinely of whooping cough in infancy, all of that has left our memory. So we're a victim of our own success. And yes, although side effects and negative things can happen, they are so rare. And this was in my video, that I've been a pediatrician for 25 years and I vaccinate conservatively millions of children a year. And I have friends and colleagues in pediatrics just in my area, but conservatively a dozen of them, who've been in practice as long as I have. So collectively, all of us have the identical experience of almost never hearing about anything significantly problematic after vaccinating tens of millions of children collectively. So you're talking about something that has been tested and retested and studied and restudied. And there's no question in our mind that the risk benefit falls far on the side of encouraging and providing vaccines. And no pediatrician either employed, and 85% of pediatricians in this country are employed, which means they get no direct benefit from telling you to vaccinate, not vaccinate. And those of us that own a practice, like myself, becoming increasingly rare. I can line item it for you. I spend $1 million a year on buying vaccines for this practice. All in all, I get reimbursed by your insurance companies about $1,250,000. That $250,000 does not quite even cover the cost that it takes for me to store, monitor, staff time, management of the vaccines I keep. It's a break even, and I would actually do better by not offering it. I would do better financially. And that is the same. I get no incentives. I get no kickbacks. Insurance companies don't cover 50% of my income. We're not all driving Lamborghinis. Mostly we're driving Subarus. So it's just the reality. But that idea has taken hold and has made it very hard to talk about this. So I just don't. I just say, you can choose to believe what you want to believe, but I'm not going to spend any more time on this. And in my practice, I have to have a policy that protects all of my patients, including the most fragile. And so I don't work with people who don't vaccinate, and I don't explain myself anymore. But that's where I have to stand. And there's plenty of resources out there for people to learn anything they want to learn about all those questions. You just have to go to the right place. What I gave you is a great example. CHOP Vaccine Resource Center online.
Okay, that would be great, I think, for a lot of people to check out. I would love to have you back to talk about vaccines more generally, because I think this is just a topic we could talk about forever.
All day.
To wrap things up, I find it very interesting because I think it ties into how we began the conversation of the issue of anti-Semitism and the issue of people asking some questions with good intentions and going down rabbit holes, often pushed by the worst people out there. And so I think it can be the kind of thing where I think good people are asking questions that have very good intentions. But I think it is hard when you're trying to navigate, especially the online space, when there is a battle for basic truth.
And as you
I think that applies to all areas of life.
But attention is a currency now. So the more outrageous you can be, you just get more attention. And honestly, that motivates a lot of people because attention is a convertible currency in today's world.
Yeah. And hopefully people paid attention to this today, which is always so strange to criticize social media, to criticize attention, but also be seeking it ourselves.
Seeking it ourselves for the good.
It's the battle of hypocrisy we all face. Thank you so much for joining me. It was an absolute pleasure to have this conversation. I wish we could speak longer, and I hope you'll come back on another time and we can dig into some of these issues that I think we touched on. Would love to dig into them a little more.
And you do have my cell phone, so you can call me with any questions as a new parent. I'm happy to help you. And I would love to come back on because there's so much here to help. And if there's anything that we can do with this podcast today, other than raising the awareness of the anti-Semitism issue, is making parents feel more confident and more empowered in who they already are without necessarily feeling that they have to jump and respond and feel anxious because of what they see in social media.
We're trying. We're constantly trying. And I also noticed you didn't set a time limit on those questions. So you may be getting calls at 2 a.m.
I'm giving you free carte blanche because I love you. And I know
very dangerous
that you
thing
won't
to do.
abuse it, but I'm here for you, Ian. I'm here for you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And can't wait to talk again.